he'll surprise you every time.
I want to ask you about one of the Bills that you mentioned, Bill Peet. I read an interview with him, and he seemed kind of like a contentious, combative guy. Did you ever know him?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
No, and that was not unusual. When you have talented people, brilliant people brought together. I mean, it's like, what do they call it? Iron on iron. That's necessary to create great work. And a lot of the guys, and Pete was not the only one, but Bill was very opinionated. He's a real hardhead. I mean, he believed in what he did, and he would defend it. And he and Walt would get into these wild arguments, yelling and shouting and screaming. Well, they had done that for decades. It's nothing new. It's what they did. And I think Disney knew that because he knew he had hired good people who did good work and who believed in what they did. Yeah. Well, Pete and I wasn't around to hear, because keep in mind, I didn't run in those circles. I mean, I'm this little kid down here on the bottom level, so I'm not always privy to what goes on upstairs. By the 60s, I had made my way from the first level up to the second level, which was totally by accident, because I was not even ambitious enough to want to get upstairs. I had, I guess I had ambition. I wanted to be an animator, but I had no ambition to join the big boys in the story, up in the story room. Well, I ended up there in spite of myself. I ended up being put in story because I guess the old man wanted me there. So suddenly I found myself privy to stuff that I had no idea I would ever have this kind of access. I thought I would read about this stuff, years later, not experience it firsthand. So in that sense, it was a real opportunity. I think I probably didn't realize how important it was at the time, but looking back on it, and I said, oh my God, I was there in the room in meetings with Walt Disney, and few people had that. Not even a lot of his top animators didn't have the kind of access I had.
Is that because you were in story?
Because I was in story. It's the only reason. Because I was in story. Yeah. And I never even wanted to be in story. That's what made it even more amazing. I never even aspired to that job.
So those people on the second floor, they were in story and they were in visual development and backgrounds, and they had more access to Walt than the animators did.
Exactly, yeah. Keep in mind, Walt knew that he had the best animators, probably had the best animators in the world. Well, he didn't have to supervise them.
Right.
They all knew what they were doing. He didn't have to look over their shoulder. Leave them alone and let them do their job. Story, well, that's something that's a little more organic. It's always shifting, changing, being developed, let's try this, let's try that. That's why you saw him more. That's why you had access to him. If you were downstairs, you would rarely, if ever, have access to Walt Disney. If you were on the second floor, you would definitely have access to him every month or so.
What were story meetings like with him?
Intense.
Oh, really? Really?
Intense. They were held in the story room, not in a separate conference room. Generally, the way it worked, the way it works today, everybody seems to go to a big conference room.
Right.
In those days, you wouldn't go to a conference room. Your office was the conference room, because that's where you're doing the story work.
Right.
So Walt came to you. You didn't go to him; he came to you. So, and the meetings were always set up in advance, so we all knew when he was coming, or approximately when he was coming. His arrival would be announced by a loud cough. He would always cough, and that was his warning signal to let you know that he was approaching. And so he would come in. He would usually in a business suit or at least jacket and tie. And he'd come in, and in those days, ashtrays. Adults smoked. So Walt would come in, and he'd maybe exchange a few greetings with the director or producer, top guys, not with us lowlifes, maybe a wave or whatever. Or if he acknowledged us at all, he'd just come in and say basically, okay, what do you have to show me? And then one of these story artists, and usually they decided in advance who would make the pitch to Walt. Making the pitch to Walt Disney was not for the faint of heart, I sure would want to do it. But you would just, you'd get up, and Walt would be seated here, and you'd get up and say, okay, you'd have to spell out the sequence. In this sequence, this is where Mowgli meets the tiger, and here's what happens. Okay, then it comes in here, go through the whole bit, and you go line by line, board, board. And if it's two boards and the assistants move the board out of the way, there'd be a second board behind it. And then you would go on and say, oh, this is what happens here. And then you fall down here, and this funny stuff happens. And then once you finish that pitch, you sit down and wait to see what Walt thought of it. And generally, he would just take his time and say, pretty good. That thing right here, I don't think we need that. I think that's distracting or whatever it is, And then the director would just walk over. You mean this sketch right here? Yes, I don't think you mean it. You just pull it off onto the floor. Anything else you don't like? So, well, there's it, rip, and that's how it worked. And then Walt would, just basically give. And generally, if he liked it, you wouldn't get beat up. You got a sense that he kind of liked what he'd seen, and he'd say, "Yeah, I like the way it's going. Keep working on it. I need some polish, and I'll come back in a couple of weeks, and we'll see how it's shaping up." And he says, "But overall, I think it's looking good, guys. Looking good, And then he would get up and make his way out of the out of the door, and he would never say, "Good work, guys. Like what you're doing." He did not give compliments. If he liked it, the less said, the better. If he wasn't beating up on you, then you did good. You did well. So he's walking out of the door, and he doesn't have major complaints, and we're all like, yeah, we nailed it. And as he walked out into the corridor, he would be talking with the director, small talk, like, hey, how's the wife, and your kid started college yet, that kind of stuff as he walks out. And then what that meant was, at noon hour, all the guys headed to the bar for a drink celebration because we did good.
Now tell me, you say some of those meetings were intense. What happened in the intense meetings?
Oh, that's when he didn't like.
Oh, okay.
That's when he didn't like stuff, and I sat in on those too, and where he complained, as I don't think that's funny. I don't like the character. I think that character's stupid. Why are you doing that? This is not working for me. This is not working. I think you ought to rethink that. Why did you do that? And then, of course, the director generally speaks for the story artist. The story artists rarely. They could, but they would rarely defend their own work. They would generally, the director would kind of like take the heat. That is, he would be talking to Walt directly. Well, Walt, we thought we might try that, and we weren't sure if it was going to work or not, but we thought we'd give it a try. And if you don't like it, we'll take it out and we'll start over. So you got that whole thing of knowing how to talk to Disney, and we were so grateful that Walt didn't speak directly to us, because I didn't want to stammer and try to make excuses. I got the feeling that our director, Woolie Reitherman, had been through this so many times. He was a seasoned pro. He was a veteran. If things went well, he knew how to take it. If things went bad, he knew how to take it, because he knew how to deal with it. He'd been working with Walt Disney for decades, so he knew how to, answer the right questions. So, he just had all the answers right on the tip of his tongue. Yeah, you're right, Walt. I never should have done that. And don't worry, we're going to fix it, and we'll take care of it. It's going to be great. You'll see next time. So he had all the right answers, and he had a way of smoothing things over.
Did he have a German accent, Woolie Reitherman?
No, not at all. He's got this wonderful German name, Wolfgang Reitherman. No German accent.
Oh, okay.
He sounds like he should have a German accent, but Woolie. And they always called him Woolie. Very imposing, because he was very tall. He's a very tall guy, and he smoked a cigar. Talk about a man's world, we not only had cigarette smoking, we had cigar smoking, like even more smoke. So we're talking about smoke-filled rooms, like politics of the old. And so again, and that's what made me feel almost even more like a child, because I'm in this room with all these grown-ups, and they got their cigarettes and they're smoking, and director's smoking a cigar, and I felt like I was, like you'd stepped into a room with friends of your parents, why am I here? I'm this child in this room.